Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Metarealism. I just finished watching the movie The Chosen. It is based on a book by that same title written by Chaim Potok. It is the fourth time I've watched it. Each time is better. The movie gets better each time I watch it. If you have not seen the movie, it is available on YouTube. Make sure you select one with the higher resolution. There is a lower resolution one, which is not that enjoyable to watch. I love that movie. I love it because I know exactly what it's about as a native New Yorker. The terminology that I would use is not in that movie. Basically, what it is about is a clash between Satmar Hasidim and the modern Orthodox, also sometimes called Yeshiva University Orthodox, because Yeshiva University, which is in uptown Manhattan, is one of the main places where modern Orthodoxy developed. Modern Orthodoxy attempts to remain consistent with the principles of Orthodoxy, but to adopt them to a modern world. And so in that sense, they differ with both conservative Judaism and conservadox, or traditional Judaism. They attempt to stay closer to the Talmud, to the laws of Judaism. Whether they do that satisfactorily is not for me to say. But there's long been a battle in Western Judaism between the Satmars and basically all other strands of Judaism. The Satmars are the major Hasidic branch that was opposed to the establishment of the state of Israel. Now, the reason they gave for it is a biblical reason. And from that perspective, it makes sense. The idea was, well, the Messiah, the Mashiach, or in Arabic, the Masih, will be the one to establish Israel. It cannot be established by human beings. And so the Satmars basically regarded, and perhaps still do regard, most other Jews, most other branches of Judaism, as basically being in violation of halachic law. They say, again, since there has been yet no Mashiach, there can be no Yisrael or Israel. A perfectly rational interpretation. If I were still Jewish, meaning in the sense of following the religion of Judaism, I certainly am still Jewish in terms of my ancestry, but not my religious practice. But again, if I were still following the religion of Judaism, the only branch of Judaism that I could consider accepting from a purely halachic standpoint is Satmar, because Satmar is consistent with the Torah and the Talmud. On the other hand, in terms of my own likes and dislikes, which may be inconsequential, I like Reconstructionist Judaism, or, as it has recently renamed itself, Reconstructing Judaism. Same thing. The basic idea of reconstructing Judaism is that Judaism should be defined as an evolving Jewish civilization. And when I look back on the history of Judaism and of Jewry, that is what I see. Orthodox Jews will sometimes call themselves Torah Jews. And I certainly respect their right to call themselves that. It is not my place to tell anyone how to name themselves. However, from my own perspective, and again, it's only my perspective, are they really Torah Jews? I would say no. When we look back on Judaism as it was described in the Tanakh, there is virtually no resemblance between that Torah Judaism, that biblical Judaism, and the kind of Judaism which developed after the diaspora, the dispersion of the Jews following the destruction of the temple. When my people, Ashkenazi Jews, ended up mostly in Central Europe on ghettos, and my ancestors were not treated that well at all. They were mocked. They were treated like trash. For at least some time, Jews living on the ghettos were forced to wear these pointy hats, which to me makes me think of a clown. And perhaps that was the intention. I don't know. Certainly, wearing a pointy hat is not very respectful. But that is how, for a period of time, Jews living on ghettos were forced to dress. It's shameful, purely shameful. I don't know what other word can be used to describe it. Making human beings dressed like clowns. It's an embarrassment, even to me. And I am an American, not a European. I did not live back at the time of Judaism in the ghetto, so I have no familiarity with it. My only knowledge of it is by reading about it, but in some ways that's enough. That's enough. Anybody who reads about the way that Jews were treated in Europe on the ghetto literally has no heart. Literally has no heart. no soul, no moral compass. In fact, I'm not even sure if I would call such a person a human being. Unlike most people, I have a very strict criterion for what is a human being. A human being to me is someone who possesses humanity. It is not a synonym for a Homo sapien, or more precisely, a Homo sapien sapien. I mean, anybody born of two Homo sapien sapien parents will be a Homo sapien sapien, but that alone does not make that person a human being. That alone does not give that person humanity, concern, and care. The movie The Chosen began by showing scenes of the Jewish Holocaust. Scenes that my Hebrew school teacher, Joel Bernstein, would show us again and again. Purely disgusting. Bodies, dead bodies, skeletons, or near skeletons, in piles on top of one another. That's what you see. People that were put into gas chambers and ovens. The people who did that, Hitler, the SS officers, were they human beings? No, at least not to me. Not to me, they were not. And so, watching that movie, again, for the fourth time, and again, each time I watch it, it gets better. I love that movie. I especially love Robbie Benson's character, who is the young Satmar Hasidic boy, later young man, in that movie. And no, I will not give away the story, so don't worry about it. But I would encourage that you watch it and watch the way he becomes an extremely close friend with this modern Orthodox young man. It is a relationship that you don't see every day. I know, because I'm from New York City, where that movie was situated. Although in an earlier generation, my parents' generation, but still, I can relate to it. I can relate to that movie as if I were there myself. Literally. Those two young men became close friends, beating all the odds. You would not expect a modern or yeshiva Orthodox Jew to become friends with a Satmar Hasidic Jew. I mean, if you've never seen somebody who is Satmar Hasidic, or for that matter, anybody who was Hasidic, then you have an idea of what they look like. They have sometimes been called, I guess jokingly, the Jewish Amish. They kind of look like the Amish in a way, I never knew anybody growing up in New York who was Hasidic. For the most part, The Hasids live in Brooklyn, mostly. I never lived in Brooklyn. My father was born and raised in Brooklyn, but he didn't know any Hasids either. Brooklyn is divided into many, many neighborhoods. And especially back at that time, those neighborhoods literally had nothing to do with one another. The first time I ever had an acquaintance with a Hasid was when my high school friend Jay became a Hasid. I am not sure exactly which dynasty he was a member of. A dynasty is a name for a particular branch of Hasidim, like the Satmars. But he wasn't sure either. He was kind of experimenting, looking around, trying to figure out which one would make the best fit for him. But eventually, I think he seems to have realized that none of them did. And so he left it, became an options trader on Wall Street, and may now be one of the wealthiest men in the United States, which is why I'm not mentioning his last name. I'm friends with him on LinkedIn. We know each other. We grew up literally around the corner from one another. But now he lives in New York, and I live in the Rio Grande Valley of Texas. So I honestly doubt I will ever see him again, at least not in this world. Getting back to the movie, it is very touching. Both fathers in the movie were caring men, but in different ways. The modern Orthodox father was a Zionist. And in the movie, he was one of the leaders, if not the leader, of the Zionist movement in the US. Over the course of the movie, he actually had a stroke from working too hard. His son would constantly tell him, "Papa, you need to slow down." But his father said, "I need to keep on doing this." Basically, if I don't do this, who will? Namely, working for the establishment of Israel. The Satmar father was very different. He was also a nice man, I think, came across as a nice fellow. But he did not talk to his son after his son was a very little boy. That kind of silence was intended to breed a kind of heart or heartfulness in the son. As the movie neared its end, the father began to realize that maybe I made a mistake. To that, I would say, you finally figured that out? But regardless, that's my own personal judgment. And then it all changed. The father and the son, again played by Robbie Benson, the Satmars, talked all the time. The son did not go in the direction that the father wanted, and I won't say what that direction was. Surprisingly, the modern Orthodox son went in a direction, I'll just say closer to the direction that the Satmar son was expected to go in. That's kind of the paradox of the movie. You really need to watch that movie. It is a brilliant film. And I think once you watch it, especially if, like me, you come from a Jewish family, you will want to watch it again and again. I mean, I just finished watching it, and I want to watch it again. Will I? Not now. I will in the future because I love it. It is literally my favorite movie of all times. The only movie that may come close is The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, which of course is entirely different, but I like it. But this movie is serious, and it's based on a historical novel, meaning it's not history. The characters in the film are fictitious, but the events that they are portraying were actual events which occurred in the US and in Israel eventually. Meaning there were Satmars in Brooklyn. There were modern Orthodox or Yeshiva University Orthodox in New York City. Very different. Very, very different from one another. So it's really hard for me to make sense of this, looking at it from a somewhat different perspective as a Maoist third worldist, which perhaps puts a twist on it that you may not have expected me to do. I look at that movie, and when the movie talks about Palestinians, they talk about the Palestinians as warriors, as killers. Never once is it mentioned that the Zionists are the ones who invaded their land, and they were simply defending their homes. But that was not brought up in the movie. So this was a first worldist movie, not a third worldist movie. It was centered in what some might regard as the heart of the first world, New York City. Certainly the financial, the entertainment capital of the United States. And yet the Palestinians were not given the time of day. There was no respect shown to them. There was not a single Palestinian portrayed in the movie, not even one, not a single person. The Palestinians were treated as the subaltern, as the others, as the marginalized. They were basically ignored, even by the Satmars. Now, in real life, did the Satmars ignore the Palestinians? No. No. But in this movie, they did. It was never mentioned once that one of the major reasons why the Satmars opposed the establishment of Israel, aside from the more usual thing that the Messiah needs to come first, was that people already lived there. And till this day, Satmars go to Palestine and meet with Palestinians. They are the friends of the Palestinians, or I should say, among the many friends, the many Jewish friends of the Palestinians. But that was not a part of the movie. Not at all. Why? Well, I mean, I don't know. I can't read the mind of the author of the book, Chaim Potok, or the playwright, I should say the screenplay. I don't know. But that's not what they were trying to get across. That was not the objective of the film. It was not a pro-Palestinian film. It was a film which attempted to show two different views on the Holy Land. The Satmar view and the modern or yeshiva Orthodox view. And that is it. But it gave no real context, except that only the Messiah can establish the state of Israel. That was it. So it was a kind of, I guess you could say, a theological or eschatological film, talking about the theology of the future. But it was not a humanistic film. It did not focus on the actual suffering of the Palestinians. Again, the Palestinians were only portrayed as the aggressors. And even, I would say, as warlike. So, although I love that film, it is spectacular. The acting is beyond comparison, at least to me. It's like an all-star cast. A brilliantly made movie. And yet it left out the victims of Zionism, the Palestinians, other than portraying them as warlike. So I guess I could say that's unforgivable, and it is in its own way. By the same token, I guess it is unrealistic to expect one film to do everything. It can't. It can't. But if I were Chaim Potok, or if I were the screenwriter, I would have put an emphasis on the Palestinians who were being robbed of their land, rather than an emphasis on the need for a coming Messiah who would in turn establish Israel. But that's just my view. Am I biased? You bet. You bet. I am biased. I would not deny that. This is not a newscast. I am not a newscaster. Well, or if I am, I'm a newscaster who does commentary. I have a background in newscasting. I've done newscasting for radio stations in the past, 3 of them. So I could do newscasting, but this is not newscasting. I'm not reporting on any current stories. I'm giving you my own take on this movie based on the book by Chaim Potok, The Chosen. For now, this has been Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D. for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.